Hey everyone, welcome back. For Sai and I, we just finished Thanksgiving and it's been a few weeks since we recorded, but I, for one, am happy to get back into this. And so, with that, I'd like to welcome my returning guest. We can't really call you a guest after this many episodes, but
I'd say so.
Sai.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for hosting as usual. And it's great to be back. Looking forward to doing more of these terms.
Yeah. So, we've got about like 10 turns to catch up, and I've been kind of peeking ahead. We've got a fun, action packed 10 turns ahead of us. So, I'm really excited about this. Where were we? I guess I'll kick us off and you can fill in some of the details. We last episode was turn 68 and this is 69.
Nice.
TNG got kind of pounded again, like a little bit less commitment by Pangea. And they've been getting attacked by Erythia as well. So they're kind of bleeding out right now. That's kind of, I think, the main thing. And Vedheim's also bleeding out.
The summary that I would put is basically that the Pan plus Gath axis has been able to maintain consistently good relationships with everyone who they're not currently fighting. And TNG, because of their diplomatic issues with Erythia, kind of was stuck in a position where they were going to be the one aggressed upon by basically the larger force. So Pan and Gath, rather than having the rest of the world ally against them, is continuing to pick off the other players basically one by one, or in this case,
Yeah.
two at a time, focusing both Vedheim and TNG. And Vedheim in particular had a series of, well, first they just lost a ton of their territory as they were basically trying to get set up for a good fight. Then when they finally
Mhm.
did take a fight, Gath did some really impressive Gift from Heaven round one plays in order
Yeah.
to disrupt Vedheim's army, while also just having like a ton of extremely expensive supercasters in the form of their Archdevil and Elemental royalty. And
Yeah.
between that, Gath won an extremely decisive engagement where Vedheim was already in a position where they were basically just like had lost too much territory in order to really be a top contender anymore, but they were still spoiling for that one good fight. And then they just lost that one dramatic field battle very decisively. So Vedheim was functionally put out of the game. TNG,
Yeah.
meanwhile, had been pushed back by Pangea mostly just a force of resources, where Pangea would basically burn TNG's resources while taking a favorable trade, starting, I believe, with the double rigger play. I think that was the first major fight they did
Yeah.
that with.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
And then they did
That
another
vortex of returning shenanigan where they just, I mean,
right. Yes.
yeah.
So first that, and then with the Vortex play, in order to basically save their own mages while bombarding TNG's army, they basically had managed to cause enough damage to TNG where Pangea was able to maintain or to gain an overwhelming resource advantage against a player
Mhm.
that they were already much richer than
Yeah.
in both gems and gold. So TNG has been pushed back very heavily as a result. And Vedheim on its last legs, it looks like these two nations that were the focus of essentially the rest of the map are going to be devoured without being able to cause the sort of damage that they might have wanted to.
Yeah. And importantly, a lot of TNG's losses were items. So it was a lot bigger than that one army. So these next, few turns, it's going to be important. Can they rebuild items that let them like take maybe a favorable engagement? And then this like style that Pangea is fighting them with, this like extremely mage heavy style where they're basically using mages as infantry. It's not meta at all in most. Maybe it becomes meta for late age Pan or other people played it that way before, but they're going to have to adapt and figure out what is the best thing they can do against this mage heavy strat. So that's something we have to look forward to. Because one thing I know about TNG is they aren't going to keep trying the same thing again and again. So
What's interesting though to me is that a lot of what TNG did is just kind of going down the list of like what all the good spells are, right? Like they're already doing Army of Gold, they're already doing Wailing Winds.
right.
So they're bringing in basically all the big battlefield spells that you would typically expect to be able to help define a late game battle. But against these huge communions that Pangea is able to basically casually deploy, like Pan can lose like
Right.
100 mages and still bounce back. It's
Right.
hard to find a way to efficiently counter that, given that Pan's mages are both very effective in quantity because they have these big communions that can do more than just, magic resist negating stuff. Like they aren't just doing enslave spam, although they can.
Right.
They aren't just doing gifts from heaven, although of course they can do that too. They just have this very deep pool of options, and the mages are so mobile that they can always bring them where they need to be. So between all these
Right.
advantages that Pan has from these sages, it's very hard for TNG to find a way to efficiently fight into that.
Well, I think I think you're right. It's going to be hard, and I think that's what's going to make it fun to see if they can come up with something because there's a lot of things you can do in Dominions, right? Maybe I mean they can't do probably mass assassins, but assassins are a thing to consider. Like they're clumping all their guys together too. So maybe there's some way to like drop some kind of nukes like right in the middle, like just you know,
Yeah.
like there's maybe things they could do. I don't know, but that's the fun part about Dominions is like Pan has like put forward this chip, and they're like, there's a really like or a card, right? And they're like, you can't counter this. And now, and so far TNG hasn't been able to, but we get to see if they come up with something.
Yeah, and TNG had previously done some very good focused evocation stuff with their Shimmering Fields play against Lava.
Right.
So against a very mage ball stack where the actual like evocation is going to be targeted on the mages, I do believe that TNG can actually do quite a bit of damage. Like I think you were like smart to point that out. Like if we're hypothesizing about different things they could do, one thing that I would think of is just round one Niffle Flames or Flamestorm type stuff
Right.
in order to try to land in that mage ball. And if they can get big enough casters, they can do a lot of damage very quickly, similar to what Gath did with their Gift from Heaven spam against Vedheim.
Yeah, I think a lot of these strategies though to work really well, you probably need items. Like you probably need crystal matrices and stuff like that, and that's what TNG lost a ton of. So
Yeah.
it's also going to be really interesting. Can they like scrap together? Can they MacGyver their way to take on some of these armies?
Yeah, in particular against this style of play from Pangea, where their mage spells are going to be very long range, so they don't actually need to be very far forward. Having range boosters is going to be a big deal. And while like the flame focus stabs are pretty cheap,
Right.
the water lenses are pretty cheap. That in conjunction with the boosters and some items that in order to make your mages not die instantly can combine to make for a fairly expensive kit. Like 20 to 30
Yeah.
gems per caster isn't like crazy. It's about the price of a thug, but it's still a pretty heavy commitment, especially if you wind up losing them in the battle.
Yeah, it would be. It's something I haven't really seen, but it would be really cool to see like a build kind of tailored around like Farcaster and then water lenses, or potentially flame focus staff, since those are both cheap ways to extend range. And you like shroud up mages, and you have them like blast these things out.
Yeah, I've done
Turn
something
one.
I've done some stuff with that with clouds with Machaka recently, but that was more of an early game thing.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to these messages because we've got a small novel from TNG.
Yeah, you want me to do this one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, Demosthenes. Time was short for both of us this last turn. I didn't have a chance to do anything but brainstorm a bit over Discord, and so we miscounted air gems in the main battle, didn't cast Mass Flight after the 2 expected gem baits, and lost our army that should have won easily to that error. We've still got several armies and some cool plays coming, but we are irrecoverably out of the running at this point. I feel like the Gath-Pan bond is somewhat irrational at this point. Gath needs thrones off Pan to win, and I would think by now helping Pan destroy our armies is not in his interest. I think the outcome where we kill a few stacks of Centaur Sages for him on our way out would be much better. But Pan has a silver tongue, and I suspect Gath doesn't realize the extent to which we're going to fall apart from here. Even though Erythia's armies have been disappointingly not very threatening, the distraction and redirection of resources, and especially mental attention, has been ruinous. Fighting several nations who are collaborating on gem burns and able to raid essentially your entire circumference is very hard in the late game, especially when your opponents admit spending dozens of hours testing different ways to fight each army we show, while we're struggling just to script our armies in the first place. Also, fun fact, a golem without a specific cast spells at the end of its script runs into melee, just like Great Mothers and other monstrous throne defenders. That's pretty cool. I knew that they did that if you gave them enough items, and I was also under the impression that there was a general item cutoff point for commanders, where if they have enough gear, they'll go into melee. Because I've seen Throne Titans change their behavior depending on whether or not you lose cheap weapons and armor at them.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I've definitely seen them run into melee as well. But yeah, I'd be interested to know how that works in more detail. One thing I'll just comment on this is like, I think there's a thing where people are like really fearful of empowering somebody they're working with. And it's like if you're going to win a game and you feel you're a decent or good player, like you're good enough to win the game, then you should be okay allying with people and getting them strong and you getting strong too while y'all carve people up. So I don't think, like, I think Gath is looking to get something out of this too. And he probably feels that he trusts Pan. Like, Gath and Pan, this is great for them. The whole thing. Like, Gath is not worried at all with the game state right now, I don't think. So
Yeah, we've kind of been talking almost to death at this point about how strong the reliable ally situation is, where just by virtue of having that very stable partner is itself just a very inherent advantage, because you have that person you're going to be able to consistently work with, regardless of who specifically you're fighting. And I kind of see that as being like very strong. And again, this is something that we've kind of talked to death, but I think that like the note of, hey, it would probably be better for Gath individually if Pan suffered more losses is fair, but the idea of them remaining allied isn't irrational so much as it is unusual in terms of its durability. But like, I don't think it's dumb or anything for Gath to continue helping Pan.
I don't think it's dumb at all. I mean, I think in some ways this points to like the weakness of the diplomacy of the TNG nation to this point, is that they've been kind of like pointing fingers at all these scary nations. Like, Pan's scary. Why would Gath help Pan? Gath is scary. He's this big blood nation, right? Like, it's irrational to help these people. The only person you should be teamed up with is me or something, you know? But then he's like also calling everybody scary. It's like, the thing is I think like a great plan for Dominions, and I'm not sure this is the most fun meta way to play the game, but I'm pretty sure now this is one of the strongest like diplomacy meta strategies, is you find a strong player and y'all both get really big together.
Yeah,
and that's what's happening. I don't think that's irrational at all.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to a difference in how they go about the game, in that TNG is approaching this from a strictly individual nation perspective, as opposed to like a long-term thing. Like, he's not valuing the durability of the alliance itself.
Right. Another note from them.
Bit of philosophy, yes. Some Dominions players complain about Wailing Winds and Rigor Mortis and Wind of Death, and Flames from the Sky and Wrathful Skies being oppressive, and they are. But these tools are important to the game's meta because they offer some of the few ways to counter someone bringing all the buffs cast on an enormous number of mages brought to a battle. Wailing Winds in particular means you need to give a mage morale gear for it to cast Spellbound Battle, which effectively means that a nation has to commit gems in the form of morale gear for each mage you want to use in such a battle. I don't love the mechanic, it seems overtuned, especially with Blood Rain, but I do think it has an important role in limiting the extent to which communions are oppressive, and mage count determines the outcome of battles. There are ways to fight these stacks of 100 Centaur Sages spamming meteors without using one of the above spells, but they mostly rely on Pan making mistakes. Yeah, so I assume that with that, he's referring to the big evocation stuff that we were kind of theorizing. But he's also right in that, like, these sort of anti-death ball spells are very important for making it so that big player, big death ball doesn't always win. That said, I think that Wailing Winds in particular is a little less scary for Pan than it is for most other nations, just due to the higher base morale on those sages.
Yeah. They've got pretty good morale. I mean, in Hostile Dominion, it's only going to be 12. Especially if they get a Blood Rain, they'll run instantly just about. But
that's still not much better than most mages, which default to like 9 to 11.
Yeah, the other calculus here is Flames from the Sky. It requires 2 hits to kill.
Right.
So,
whereas most human mages just die in a single time they take damage. And the other thing is that the Centaur Sages can use the same gear that other mages use in order to survive these things. So, like, a Centaur Sage can wear a dragon helmet just as well as anyone else.
But when you're doing 100 Centaur Sages, you know.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I just mean.
But I think that is one of the best counters. Like, if you're able to bait, like, you put a big army together and then you move the army out or you hide it in a fort, and he rolls in with 120 Sages. If you're able to light that up with 4 Flames from the Sky, like, goodbye. You know, that'll kill 70% of these probably or something. Maybe not 70, but a lot.
Yeah, and that's 120 fire gems, I believe.
Yeah.
That's 30 each.
What's the gold per fire gem you're getting if we kill 70% of 120? 90 gold apiece.
90 times 120. 7560 divided by 120. It's 63. So decent alchemy.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems pretty value. And there's other things they could do too. Like, it's not just Flames from the Sky. Like, when there's 100 of these guys together, it's worth it to cast Leprosy and some other stuff. So, they do have recuperation though. So, it's a good chassis. It's a good chassis.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that in order to cast 4 of those simultaneously, you also need that many large fire casters, which is actually hard to get. Like, you need Flame Spirits and boosting gear. And I don't think that TNG has the bank for that on their, at least not on their own. Like there's something that maybe Erythia could put off because they also have those the Hesperides, the National Fire Mage summons. But Tianqi, I don't think can afford to do that. They would basically
Where's the
need
Golden
to.
Throne? Pan has it right now. I forget where it is though. Is this it? No. Is this it?
It's the throne on their border with Vettiheim because that had been the one that they were fighting over.
That's right. That's right.
It's the farm to the north.
This wait no. This one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It is kind of cool that the gold and silver thrones are right next to each other, or as close to each other as thrones can get.
Right. Yeah, the silver one's down here. Okay, let's get this last message from TNG. You want to finish off the TNG message for us?
Sure. Latch, a shameful display. You know someone is not checking their script properly when they somehow interpret a spell costing 2 gems, as a mage will spend 2 gems to cast that spell. Yes, mages love snorting gems. Something we all know to be most certainly not correct. Oh well, as I suspected, Pan saw the ambush coming, and also as I expected, he dramatically underestimated the scale of the amount of cubes I would bring. Unfortunately, with terrible misestimation of gem spends on my part, and we did not actually cast Mass Flight, which was the critical missing part of that battle. I'm pretty sure we would have got him if not for that misplay, and Warpsy seems to agree, but oh well. Not losing out on your sharpness in the late game is also a critical skill into minions. Yeah, it's very hard to maintain focus as the game goes late, particularly when you have all these big battles happening, especially in rapid sequence.
Yeah, some of my games lately, if I have like a mega caster, not somebody I'm worried about losing to Flames from the Sky or an assassin, and I have gems in the bank, sometimes I'm just like, I'm putting 30 gems on you.
Agreed. Yeah.
I don't know what can happen, but I know this is going to be the safest thing because if I lose this battle, I'm fucked.
Yeah, I had a Shade Mail Nature 3 mage that was casting Howl to take a throne and then hold it sequentially. So I just put 30 gems on him because you need to have that work.
Yeah. And they didn't get the normal 1 gem bait. I think did they get 2 gem baits?
It was either 2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, 2 or 3. And that's the other problem when diplomacy starts going south for you in these high skill games, is that you no longer have to worry about just one player gem baiting you. It can be multiple players, and then they can, you also have the independents attacking you,
Murs or the Long Dead Riders.
Right,
yeah.
The Long Dead Riders. What is it called again?
Pale Riders, I believe.
Is it Pale Riders? Ghost Riders. Pale Riders is the enchantment one.
No, it's Conjuration. Yeah.
Yeah, Pale Riders is the one that permanently summons.
Oh,
and
right.
Ghost Riders is
Riders.
the...
Yes,
yeah.
That's the one.
Okay. Message from Gath. The world situation has become quite shaky. From the big 6, we're transitioning to something else, which has not really taken shape yet. I'm helping Pan so far with HH drops and gem burns as part of our agreement. He pays for it, but I'm obviously not very happy with the rapid TNG downfall if it happens. And that's interesting. That's what TNG was saying.
Yeah, that's also interesting because I was under the impression that Gath was fully on board with the 2 versus the world thing that we'd been talking about.
Yeah, that would have been my impression as well.
Because at least their gameplay has always reflected that, right?
Yeah. It's also there's probably a pretty big window where he realizes that the alliance is in his favor, but he also sees the end of the alliance coming. As at the end of the game there can only be one winner, so there's going to be some window where they want to keep the alliance, but they're also not looking to super set up Pan. And that is one of the ways these things get chipped apart, is you start finding little divides to split them up.
Right.
But
and there actually are getting to the point where no one else is going to be a viable contender. They're not there yet, I would say, but they're getting to it. Because the only other people who are, I would say, still viable to win are Erythia and Xibalba, and both of them are very, very far behind these big 2.
Yeah. I think Xibalba can win, but they're going to have to transition away from Aussies, and I think more towards toolkit stuff.
But we'll doing that with the Dark Ones. They're definitely just so far behind on research that it's a very big ask.
Yeah.
And then Erythia is almost in the opposite boat, where they don't have any hammer yet at all. And frankly, just they haven't shown a good army yet this game.
Yeah. And it's bad juju if you're not showing good armies. It's very rare they just spontaneously appear in the late game. Okay. Blood Engine's heated up now. Under Illwinter, the gold cost of each slave decreases, and thus makes sense to hunt really hard. If Vettiheim and TNG are indeed removed as big players, I feel that army-wise, my best bet is masked Shadim and possibly Storm Demons because they're cheaper, easier to make, and are not terrain dependent.
Right. With the Blood
None.
9, Storm Demons become cheaper for each one. Up until that point, Shadim tend to be better just because you get 3 at a time.
Yeah. Storm Demons are also ethereal too, which is nice.
Yeah. Generally in the late game, that matters quite a bit less. It's nothing that like Pan is going to drop on you really cares. Like what Pan is killing you with is stuff like that their communions are doing, as opposed to their mundane troops.
That's probably true. None of the potentially remaining 3 nations has any shock resistance. And under Storm and Cleansing, Sheds should one-shot Aussies before luck is considered. And also stun them a lot. I really feel now they should be the core of my late game armies.
Yeah,
Also,
with something that we kind of called near the beginning is that like the transition from Cerium to Shadim is going to be a big part of Gas moves to the late game, just because their bless isn't big enough that just like you can rely on the Seer to do everything for you.
Yeah. And you benefit from having lots of Shadim. Whereas once you have a front line of Seir, you're kind of set, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the whole the thing with calculating army discrepancy based on sizes between ranged and melee. Like all the Shadim can keep firing, while the Cerium only a certain group or only a certain number can be in combat at the same time.
Right, and they're also true flyers, like in Storm. So once they run out of ammo, they're going to just descend upon your army, the enemy army, like a plague.
Yeah, you can even do that round 1 if they're like set up improperly, and you can land flyers in them. And you can't block that with Storm Staffs the way that you can Aussies.
Right. Yeah, in many ways, it's scarier than Aussies, just because they're in some ways, they're more versatile, especially in the deep late game when you're expecting Storm Staffs and Demonic Cleansing.
Yeah, they do have trouble with Fire Elementals. I mean, they can shoot Fire Elementals, no problem. But in melee, Fire Elementals do pretty well against them.
Yeah. Okay. Also with Blood 9 in 2 turns, I'll start making Demon Lords. I can before Zabalba joins because they're all useful and not really expensive for what they do. I may disappoint the viewers, but I have no plans to cast Astral Corruption anytime soon, and maybe at all. I know that my Drain Dominion is ideal for it, but at this point, it's not part of the Gathian path to victory as we are seeing. We have other plans that we'll talk about a bit later. Smiley face.
Oh, fun. I would have thought that Pan was the Nexus person, but it seems like Gath is heading that direction.
I have peeked ahead at the turns, and I know what this plan is, but I can't say anything about it because I can only reveal it when he decides to reveal it. So, I think you might know about it too, so I'll have to hold you to that silence as well.
I actually haven't peeked ahead yet. This is
but I sent you a screenshot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Where should we start?
I don't think that the thing that you sent me conflicts with Astral Corruption, though.
It kind of does, but it's actually really interesting. We'll get to mechanics for that later.
Okay.
I learned a lot from because they're going to explain this to us at some point. So
I'll look forward to it then. Because something that like I'd seen before and like figured out to do a little bit myself, but I only did it in like a fairly limited scope. And if he's like really dived into the mechanics behind it, then and like kind of refined it, then that would be really
it's refined.
Cool.
It's refined.
All right, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully we're not teasing the viewers too much.
Yeah. We got to be careful because we probably are revealing little bits we shouldn't be revealing. Okay, so this war with Erythia, let's take a look. So he's pinging this. Let's see. Maybe Erythia finally has. Are these real armies? They have summons. So this is turn 1 mass flight. What is this? You can't do Fog Warriors.
I don't know. It looks like it's missing. Look at that. I would guess that's a Fog Warriors caster, but it's missing a matrix. Maybe it's. Yeah, Mass Flight's the only thing that I can see. Or. Yeah, I don't think
so. He's got turn 1 life after death, presumably. That's really good.
But no extra gems. That's not enough to do it after gem baiting.
That's true. And life after death is one of the things. This is like one of the really important check boxes for running around with human armies in the late game. Like you kind of have to have it. So it's really good to see that. But the nice thing about having these big casters instead of relying on a communion is you can get things off turn 1. So you're a lot more resistant to various flavors of cheese. I
would say sort of. That there are definitely a lot of things, as we've seen, like with the Idols of Sorcery running around, that will cast before your slower casters. But also, that Fairy Queen in particular, as you pointed out, can't do Fog Warriors.
Right.
So,
Yeah, so we're not there, but we're taking baby steps in the right direction.
and then Word Mage can do, I don't know, like mass regen, which is great. Like, love to have it, but can't do like the what's the resist everything Gaia's Blessing.
Oh yeah.
So
God, it's been so long since I've cast that in a real multiplayer game.
oh yeah, I mean, I guess
It's a great spell. I just never end up casting it.
it's something that like you always cast if you're in a late game with mages that can cast it. It's like if you're playing a nation
Right.
that has like big nature earth mages, then it's just like always in your brain.
Right.
But there's no generic summon that has that cross path outside of the Tree Lord, and unless you're like transforming that guy. So like if you get all 3 Tree Lords, then you can transform one and then reliably resummon exactly that one. But that's the
Yeah,
only way
that's a
that I
great
know
point.
of to like reliably get big NE. I know that you can get like a little bit in with the Troll Shamans.
Right.
And then there's some modded stuff that I saw that has that pretty reliably as well. But Erythia doesn't have access outside of the Tree Lord thing to big NE. Although they do have at least one Tree Lord.
So this also is interesting too. Erythia is kind of making a claim to this throne the same time that Zabalba is coming in to scoop up some of this TNG land with pretty low commitment rating. But this was the primary. I wonder if this is going to cause a conflict between Erythia and Zabalba, because this was like one of the main war objectives for Zabalba.
It's also almost completely surrounded by Shabaldan territory at this point.
Yeah.
I would say that Erythia and Xibalba absolutely can't afford to fight each other at this point because that's it.
Yeah.
Like they're the only 2 players who can do anything to seriously contend with either Gath or Pan.
Right. Yeah. I think that's completely correct. They've forced themselves into a position where they must be allies for at least the next like 15 or 20 turns.
And even then, they need to find a way to break up the other 2. Otherwise, because like they can't win that 2v2, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing is if it becomes a 2v2, then if one of them starts dying, then I think you cannibalize that partner, and then so let's say Erythia starts dying in a 2v2 war, then you can't, as Zabalba, you cannibalize Erythia, and then you try, presumably Pangea and Gath would be petitioning you for your support, and you have to like bounce back and forth between them or something until you can get to be the big dog yourself. But
yeah, that's kind of a best case scenario though. For the other 2 players, it's going to be a very hard slog.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and then on the south, oh my goodness, what is this?
That looks like 20 dead mages.
Who is over here? Who is this man? Wait, what could possibly happen? Oh, are they going to blow up? Is this a Phoenix Spire Communion? Please, dear God, be. Wait, they've got Will of Fates. Oh, Rain of Stones.
Yeah, Rain of Stones is a great and also I would say underrated communion spell or anti-communion spell because it's going to deal very consistent damage to human mages, particularly if they're not doing arrow fend or other like resistance stuff. And while Will of the Fates will allow you to survive 3/4 of the time, when you're taking damage consistently every round, it's not just like one big burst you have to survive through. So yeah, this is a great play from TNG, taking advantage of Erythia basically missing on like a core defensive stuff. Like if you have Army of Gold, this doesn't hurt you. If you have Arrowfend and Army of Gold, you can like just comfortably take a shower in these rocks. But with only Will of the Fates as a defensive tool, that's just not enough to survive this. It's just consistent damage over time. Yeah.
God, Ducado fanboys just crying right now.
This is why you protect your squishy humans.
Oh, he's gonna get away too. He's gonna get away.
Well, sure. I mean, he was behind the army, right? So, like,
How you like them apples?
That's 30 dead mages, and it looks like it was actually the PD that he was sitting behind.
Routing, yeah. Wow.
Very cheap answer right there, and that was like that's only like 2 gems.
Yeah, I mean the economy of this is unreal.
And this is kind of going back to what I'd been saying before, like kind of my criticism of Erythia, is that they just don't have good armies. Like, this was a giant pile of mages, but it wasn't really prepared for anything that like a late game player can throw at you.
Yeah.
Like if it didn't die to this particular thing, it could have died to any number of other things. I don't think it was protected against foul vapors either, for instance.
Yeah, or Firestorm, or these guys have any kind of Firestorm blast or something?
Yeah, it's literally just Will of Fates. I think that they have fire resistance from something.
Oh, but they're not blessing somehow, so none of these guys are blessed.
What was giving
Oof.
them that FR?
Oh, wait, did they have it? Oh, maybe they got Temper Flesh or something. Let's see. But 5 fire resistance with 0 protection is not enough to live through Firestorm.
No, definitely not. But yeah, so okay, so I'm not sure what's giving them the 5 FR.
Yeah, it must be. Oh, wait, no, they don't have Temper. Somebody must have cast Resist Fire or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Little surprised that he picked up on that, but not, anything else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this has been consistent with what we've been seeing from Erythia recently as well. Like none of
Yeah.
their armies have been set to resist, for example, those statue drops. And then even now, like he basically is just dropping this army saying, here, deal with this, right? It's just literally sitting there on a TNG fort, and it's just not prepared to deal with anything.
Yeah, we have also Agartha taking back forts from TNG. Presumably this was... maybe this wasn't theirs at some point. I can't remember if Pythium took this from them, but... Was this formerly... This... I'm not sure if this was a Pythium, or if this was ever an Agartha fort before, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Based on its positioning, I would guess not, just because Agartha had been basically putting up their little cluster of forts. Remember, like in the last several turns, and that had been recent, right? That had been like the last several turns, rather than towards the start of the game.
I mean, how are we doing on the fort graph for Agartha? It's Agartha's half of Zabalba now. I mean, they are not... They're getting close to having a normal player level of forts.
If you look at their research, though, that's sort of what's telling me if they're like coming back into the game or not, and I don't think they're close.
They're half of Agartha. I mean, they're half of Zabalba. I mean,
but Xibalba has been like kind of the.
I'm huffing on the copium over here, but
yeah, I was sort of seeing Xibalba's like poor research is making them kind of like the Ottoman Empire towards the later portions of their reign, where they're like the sick man of Europe. Kind of see like a little bit of that in where Xibalba is now, where they're just kind of behind on tech to an almost terminal degree. And if Agartha is not even able to keep up with that, then they're really not at any risk of coming back into the game.
Okay, I mean, they're up 1 fort now. They've taken a fort back, so that's important for them. And they've got... So if we look at this area, TNG's defanged this army, so this is a pile of garbage now. But this big Pan army... Oh, what was this? Is still here and reporting for duty. What was this going to be?
I'm guessing Gemburn? Oh, no, that's
a thug. Yeah, definitely not a super combatant.
He tried.
He tried.
The Pan stole the Master of the Way.
Yeah.
I would guess, looking at it, that was like a Gemburn, but...
And then he tries to storm. I think this is the classic send in enough. This is Mercs, by the way.
Yeah.
Try to send in enough that it'll win if they don't have anything there, and they did.
Yeah, very budget. And yeah, I actually like that Merc in particular for that role, just because lifelong protection beats so many things. Like if you're doing like some sort of like very minimal counter, LLP tends to do very well.
Is this the guy who has it, the High Magus?
Yeah, he's like a fire earth astral mage who has a lifelong protection and leads Ghoul. I assume based on the weirdness of the collection of units and item and so on, that it's someone from Illwinter's campaigns. Because anytime that there's like unique NPCs like that, that's sort of like my default guess as to where they come from.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's see what this is. Kind of, we've been skimming through a lot of the raids. Just be like, oh, it's guys killing PD. So that's kind of interesting. Pillar of Fire. This guy's got 1 bodyguard. Oh, and they're not communioned up at all. These are just buffing themselves as like thugs.
And then like advance and cast, I would guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Sages can do that really well. I like the Earth guys for that, just because of Iron Skin.
How about that? It's pretty cool.
I think that the Fire Lord actually made a really big difference, though, just because fire might not be considered like the best path for, well, for a number of reasons, but it's very good at just like killing via evocation against like regular PD or regular troops.
Mm-hmm. So the situation in the south here is pretty interesting. There's a bunch of these elves over here, these she elves, and there's a decent number of scales troops here and a big pile of cubes. And all of this basically has to defend against this defanged Erythian army, this enormous pile of sages, 55 it looks
That's
like.
not even, that's definitely not the most enormous pile that Pan has thrown out.
Sure, yeah. I guess we can't call 60 mages a big pile anymore.
At least not for Pangaea. For everyone else,
right.
yeah. But for Pan, that's a medium commitment stack.
It's a medium commitment. And then he also has to decide to defend against the Garth or not. And this is a reasonably scary army. I mean, it's a lot of Umbrals.
Yeah, I think, absent the need to fight the other much larger and stronger players, he would have no problem killing that Umbral stack. But, given that he can't focus on it, it can continue to be an annoyance. Also,
Right.
that's his enchantment discount place where he has all those cubes, right?
Is it? Yes, the Cedar Pillars. Yeah,
But
he
yes,
does not want to lose this.
And I was going to say, like, that's why all those cubes are there. That's their home.
Yeah. So there's armies over here, but again, a lack of items. That's an issue. And then over here, Pan's patrol. Oh, so Pan expected an attack. They patrolled with 100 dudes.
That's interesting. I wonder what they were expecting to attack them there.
Dear God. TNG's going to have PTSD after this. I mean, every time they see a Centaur Sage, it's going to be...
Post-traumatic sage disorder.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And then Ancestor Smith here. I'm really interested to see this because I'm wondering if he's going to do like Wind of Death traps. Oh, this is a Rain of Stones play.
Yeah, although it's going to be much less effective against Pan than it is against the Deducados, not just because the sages are so much tankier, but also just because they kill them so much more quickly.
Yeah. Dear God.
He'll manage to lose one, but he got an Ancestor Smith in exchange. That's a decent trade.
Yeah, I mean, was there a lot of gem baiting at least? Was there some silver lining? I think gems did get spent. Because there's some swarm casts. Yeah, okay, he got off the full suite of buffs and stuff, so they've got Army of Gold on him. Oh, I don't see luck.
Yeah, Army of Gold is the big one for surviving Rain of Stones. And then it looks like he's got Fog Warriors there, I think.
Yeah, Fog Warriors as well.
Yeah, so between those two, Rain of Stones shouldn't kill you.
Yeah. And he's also got
How did he lose the one
anti-magic
sage that
up.
did die?
Well, let's find out.
Oh, he got hit by a composite
By an
bow.
archer. Yeah. That'll do it. God, was that this one?
Mhm.
There's 90 sages here. 100
101.
here.
That's
Oh
why I was
my
saying
God.
with the 50, 60 that we'd seen before doesn't count
Yeah.
as big stacks. Those are the big stacks.
And the other important thing is there's really nothing to defend over here. There's just nothing.
Yeah, that's why I
Like
was
the
surprised.
armies are dead.
That's why I was surprised to see him patrolling there. Because, like, what is he patrolling against? The only thing that I can think of is that he really, really wants to cover the retreat of that other army. So the one that just ran into the Rain of Stones and put that fort under siege. I'm guessing that he was patrolling basically just to make sure that those weren't routed by some sort of Wailing Wind super combatant.
All right, here's a really hot take, but he's done with research. Maybe he was just trying to get scouts.
I mean, it's possible, yeah. I was going to say, like, wherever the sages are, if they're not en route to another army, it does make sense to patrol with them because it's not like they need to research anymore.
Right. Oh, gosh. All right, and then raided here with the Hydromancer, Pan, and some Cataphracts. We are starting to see normal units. Like there's Cataphracts over here, some snipers as well.
Yeah, but not that many. He's definitely gone all in on this sage-only playstyle, and it's been working. I'm actually...
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that, like, I remember earlier I'd been saying, like, oh, you can't just have sages, you need regular units. And here you prove me wrong. You really can
That's right.
go with just sages.
You can't just have only sages.
When you have this many, apparently, yeah.
God. And they're just destroying things. Like, look at this. The one thing that we're not seeing that I'd like to see more of is Howl. But in this case, it's the air elementals. This air elemental is really good.
Yeah, air elementals are strong to the point of being oppressive, I would say, in general. So anytime that you can take good advantage of them, it's like great to be able to deploy them. And they're particularly good against a lot of the sorcery stuff. So like Skelespam, obviously is going to do
Yep.
almost nothing against them. So all these Vedheim stacks, these like low commitment defensive things that Vedheim's trying to set up, are going to really struggle against dealing with air elementals. The only thing that Vedheim can do in order to fight air elementals are those big stacks, right? Where you have Great Eagle bodyguards and similar like specific counters. And at that point, you're deploying a full army. Whereas Pan can deploy air elementals very casually.
Right. Yeah, so Pan has basically they pinned Vedheim from their angle into the cap. And now it's a question of who's going to take it, and it must be Zabalba or Gath. Because
it must be Gath, yeah.
Yeah. It could be Zabalba, so they've got a ton of Aussies up here. But Pan is clearly focused on TNG, but not focused so much that they can't afford to maintain raiding control of the Vedheim land.
I would also guess that the person who gets Gath is going to be decided by consensus, as opposed to by whoever is like, militarily taking it first.
Right. That's probably true. Otherwise, there's not really any, I don't think there's, any important battles over here.
Well, there is one important thing to note, and that's that is Gath's big army, right? Like that's the one that's got their elemental royalty. So I'm pretty sure that this means that Gath is going to continue marching forward to get Vedheim. It's either that or the throne.
Oh, I think he's going for the throne first, but he could backfill the throne. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
my assumption seeing this was it was going for the throne, but that's not necessarily the right move. So the only thing that's weird is Zabalba controls this. So if Gath were to go for it, they would have to like come up and then have this capital poking into the Pan.
Take the Zabalba province. Like you can trade them for it. Like it's not like you have to just like go be like, this is mine coming through. But you can talk to them, give them a different province for it or money or whatever. But the fact that Zabalba owns it now doesn't block Gath by any means.
Yeah, okay. I don't think there's much else to talk about for this turn. Let's check the battles here, make sure we didn't miss anything. It's the farm.
Yeah, that one Arithia stack, I think, was the one place where we saw major losses this turn.
Right.
Which is kind of funny given how low commitment the actual thing that was killing all those mages was. It's literally just like one guy with a couple gems.
That's
PP,
very true. Okay, well, I think that puts us at the end of this episode. Closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the one player that we didn't really talk about that much is Zabalba, but we talked about them kind of in passing in terms of like their diplomatic situation. But looking at the research graph, which we were kind of just like glancing at previously when we were talking about Agartha, they really aren't catching up that fast. Like you see that they have been ticking up, but like they've been ticking up to the point where they're like now at the same rate of progression as TNG, who is dying and deploying everything they can in their defense. So they're still quite a ways behind. And definitely nowhere close to like finishing out research. That said, they are probably at the level where they can have at least 1 9, maybe a couple. So getting Alteration 9, for example, is going to be a big deal. And if they can get to Blood 9, that would also help in terms of giving them different options, I would say, for their bulk summons.
Okay. Yeah, let's take a look at the size real quick before we close out here. Gath number 1, Pan number 2. And
a lot of that
Zabalba number
3, recent, actually, which is interesting.
Yeah, because Gath they've basically been finished with the Vedheim War for a bit, but so Vedheim's basically been dead longer than TNG has. So
right, and that makes sense that you can't really take all those TNG territories until you've dealt with the TNG armies. Whereas Vedheim had sort of the opposite approach, where they were basically raided to death very quickly, and then only later did they actually send their armies out to fight after they'd already lost all their land. TNG, I would say, just like, now that we're like looking back at this a little bit, I would say they actually did a much better job than Vedheim in terms of defending their core territory, in that they actually had to lose their armies first before they actually bled all those provinces, whereas Vedheim got raided to death.
Yeah. What if the army graph shows that as well? Man, the army graph doesn't show. I think that's the thing. Like, it doesn't look like the wheels are off the TNG wagon from the army graph, but that's not showing all the items that got lost, which I think is actually maybe the biggest thing. But
yeah, especially given that they had those expensive temp gem stuff. The
Yeah.
army graph in general, I would say, hasn't been very descriptive for a while just because of how much chaff is featured in that. Like, that's, who's got the most thralls and blood
Yeah.
rolls.
I mean, you can see Vettiheim bleeding out in the army graph right there at where they were 30 turns ago.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, that's about it. Everybody else seems fine.
But in Vettiheim's case, a lot of that was that they were losing all those blood hunting provinces. So they were losing all that patrol chaff.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that just struck me as I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, the Erythia graph looks fine. I'm like, well, it's mostly mages, but that they've lost, but you can't really tell. And I was like looking at Pan, I was just thinking like they're kind of been doing similar strategies where it's like naked mages walking around, and it's just, while Dukados are really good at some things, they're just not Centaur sages.
Yeah, not when it comes to durability, and certainly not when it comes to mobility. The
Yeah.
other thing, though, which I don't want to keep harping on it, is that Erythia just hasn't really been scripting, or at least
Yeah.
not to the extent that's kind of required in these very late game turns.
That's also something I want to check here. Like, how are they doing turn 1 communion on everything? Or like the really sweaty way to script it is some of these guys are doing body ethereal. They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
So they're
doing
doing pretty sweaty stuff where he's doing a lot of, he's not having everybody go in the communion and right at the beginning.
He's also got those pans for out of communion big battlefield spells.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Well, hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. And Sai, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting.
And we'll see you next time. Take care.